to jump ahead like that. Okay. Okay. All right. So I hope today that I will convince you about the joys of looking at, learning about, and falling in love with birds. So most people think of New York City as looking like this: wall-to-wall glass and steel and concrete. But for me, this was New York City. This is where I lived for almost 40 years. The 79th Street Boat Basin, a small city-run marina on the Hudson River at the foot of West 79th Street. So I moved there when I was 30 years old, in 1975. I always loved nature, and I had lived on a houseboat in Sausalito in the 1960s. And so when I came back to New York, which is where I'm from, I found a boat to rent at the Boat Basin. And I met and fell in love with the guy next door, who, my husband, Jim, who was a biology professor at Brooklyn College. And he had a dog and I had a dog. And so then we had two dogs. And every day I would walk our dogs around the ball field in the morning and then again in the afternoon, and he would walk them at night. And then we had a baby, our son Jonah. And when Jonah was around 3 years old, one of our neighbors, Werner Bureau, who lived on this boat here, had an 80-year-old parrot who was named Bobo, who was a very, very picky eater. And so Werner would give me the seed every day that Bobo wouldn't eat and told me to just throw it out for the birds. Now, at that point, although I loved nature, I knew very little about it. I recognized pigeons. I knew the names of sparrows. I didn't know they were house sparrows, but I knew the name sparrows. So I started throwing the seed out on my morning walk and my afternoon walk. And one day this little bird showed up, beautiful, a tawny brown body and a red crest and a red beak. I had no idea what she was, but she started following me on all my bird walks. In the morning, she started sitting, there's a railing here so people don't fall in the river. And she would call to me, sip, sip, which is the call of her bird species. And then one day I was teaching at the 92nd Street Y. I was a pre-K teacher, and there was a blizzard, and they sent us home early. And I took the 79th Street Crosstown bus, got off in Riverside Drive, and walked around the rotunda and down. As I was coming down here, she flew out of the snow and the wind, calling to me and calling to me. So I ran home to my boat and I got a bag of sunflower seeds. And then I ran back to the park and I moved away a pile of snow by the sweet gum tree. And I put out all these seeds and all these birds came down to feed. And I decided I needed to know what she was. So I borrowed a field guide, this field guide, the Field Guide to North American Birds, Eastern Region, from a friend. I had never heard of field guides. I had no idea that they even existed. And I was able to look her up. And she was a northern cardinal. And then after that, I wanted to know the name of every tree, every bird, every fish, crab, shrimp that swam by my boat. And I became a student again, and I became a student of the natural world. I went back to school. I got my doctorate in science education. And after 3 years of following me on every bird walk, this gorgeous red male showed up. She hung out with him for a few days, and then she took off, and I never saw her again. But she completely changed my life. I started writing, and then I was approached by an editor at Johns Hopkins University Press who asked me to write a book about the natural world of New York City. And I said, well, it has to be a field guide because I found them so useful. So that was my first book. That was 2007. Then I wrote Field Guide to the Street Trees of New York City. Then I wrote Field Guide to the Neighborhood Birds of New York City. And then I wrote Honeybee Hotel about honeybee hives in the chef's garden on the roof of the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. And my last book, called River, a Hudson memoir, is coming out next November 2025. And it's part memoir of my almost 40 years living on a houseboat and part natural history about the Hudson River itself. So this bird has given me so much. A career of teaching science to children from preschool through elementary school, middle school, high school, college, and then writing books, leading walks, giving talks like this. And it all started with her. So why do we have so many birds in New York City in this concrete jungle? And these are photos of migrating birds, mostly of warblers. Why are there so many here? Well, we live under what's called the Atlantic Flyway. So the birds that migrate south in the fall have to come back north in the spring. And that is taking place right now. And when they fly over and they look down at New York City, they see 500 miles of coastline. They see thousands of acres of parkland. They see millions of trees, freshwater streams, ponds, lakes, and saltwater estuaries like the Hudson, the Long Island Sound, the East River, Jamaica Bay Wildlife Refuge. There is such a great diversity of habitats for them. And they either drop down to rest and feed and then move on to go further north to nest, or they stay here to raise their young over the summer. So we are the northern breeding grounds for migrating birds. And for the winter, they go down to their southern feeding grounds. There are many flyways in this hemisphere. So there is the Atlantic Flyway that we are under, the Mississippi Flyway. I'm so sorry it's doing that. The Mississippi Flyway, the Central Flyway, the Rocky Mountains, and the Pacific Flyway. And it all comes starting in South America, through Central America, through North America, and up. And it's happening right now by the hundreds of millions every night. Songbirds, warblers, tanagers, grosbeaks, and more are passing over. This is a map showing migration from South America to Central America to North America. There's South America, it's starting up. And this is March, April, May, and June. All those little dots, each one is a bird that's picked up by different radar around the world. And so in the early spring, much of the migration is in the west and the Rocky Mountains. And then it starts to move into the Mississippi Flyway and then eventually into the Atlantic Flyway. So this is what they are predicting for tonight. Last night, almost 300 million birds passed over. This is what they're predicting for tonight. That red line moving across is sunset. And that's when birds migrate. They migrate at night. They migrate by the stars. And you can see that our whole area is at high migration traffic. The yellow line moving across is sunrise. And that's when the migration slows down because the birds will rest during the day. They'll feed, they'll sleep, they'll bathe, or they'll find a nesting site. So birds that migrate don't leave the Northeast because it's cold. They have lots of down feathers to keep them warm. The birds that leave to find food throughout the winter. And that's why South America, Central America, Mexico, southern United States. That's why it's called their winter feeding ground, because they can find food. Warblers need caterpillars. Orioles need fleshy fruit and insects. Hummingbirds need flowers. They also need invertebrates. Like this little hummingbird's about to eat that spider. Except for pigeons and doves, who produce a crop milk, a very protein-rich fluid for their babies. All other birds have to feed their young animal protein, insects or larger animals. So here we have a female American kestrel feeding a gigantic tomato hornworm caterpillar to her baby. A yellow rumped warbler, a yellow warbler, a black and white warbler, a magnolia warbler, a female redstart. All these birds are coming through now. The common yellowthroat. Wherever you go into any of the parks, you'll see these birds. This is a prothonotary warbler with her beak filled with invertebrates, a spider, a caterpillar. It looks like the yellow one looks like a moth, probably going to her nest or his nest. Cerulean warbler, the beautiful scarlet tanager with a gigantic wasp in its beak. Here's the rose-breasted grosbeak female and male. The red-winged blackbird male and female. You start to notice the females are pretty brown, not as colorful, because they're camouflaged. So when they sit on the nest, they blend in. And the males are colorful to attract females. We have migrating woodpeckers too. We have year-round woodpeckers. We have several species of migrating woodpeckers. And one species is the flicker, the northern flicker. In the west, you have the red shafted flicker, and here we have the golden shafted flicker. Exquisitely beautiful birds. They are ground feeding birds. Most woodpeckers will peck at the trunk of a tree, right? But with the flickers, they have a very long digging bill because they feed on ants that are underground. So they can't be here in the winter when the ground is frozen. They have to migrate. They have a very long tongue with a sticky saliva, so they can just pick ants up easily wherever they are. And they also will eat fruit. So as they're migrating, they'll stop and pick up crab apples or hawthorn berries. Another migrating woodpecker are the sapsuckers. Here on the east, we have the yellow-bellied sapsucker. In the west, you have the red-breasted sapsucker. Sapsuckers are keystone species. They create habitat and food for other animals. And this is how they do it. I'm going to play a little video here.
All the way from Mexico. The yellow-bellied sapsucker. His beak hammers 6 times a second, wounding the tree deeply and chiseling into the vessels carrying the precious sugar. His feathery tongue quickly laps up the weeping liquid. On this tree last year, he dug hundreds of holes, but now all the wells are dry. It's not enough to deter a determined sapsucker. He can dig as many as 1,000 holes in a season. And on another tree, he's excavating a nest. If he finishes it, and keeps his wells running sweetly, he could attract the attention of a female. But there's another bird that could ruin his plans. A ruby-throated hummingbird. He's followed the sapsucker all the way from Mexico. His wings beat 80 times a second, putting him on a calorific knife edge. The weeping sap is the best source of sugar currently available, and feeding at 15 sips a second, he can quickly drain a well dry. He's too fast for the sapsucker to chase off. So the sapsucker opens more and more wells. Eventually, despite the interruption, he finishes off his nest, creating a deep hollow in the tree. Now, everything is prepared.
Oh, the hummingbird follows the sapsucker from Mexico. And east of the Mississippi, we just have the ruby throat. West of the Mississippi River, there are many different species of hummingbirds, and they follow the red-breasted sapsucker up. At the time that they follow them, there are very few flowers blooming, so there's very little nectar available for these hummingbirds. But they know that if they follow the sapsuckers, they'll be able to find food. So here's the rufous. Oh my God, why is this happening? Yeah. This is the rufous hummingbird. It's a western hummingbird, and it follows the red-breasted sapsucker up to feed at the sap wells. And here you have a squirrel feeding at the sap wells, and a flower fly, and ants. The thing about sap is that in the late winter, the early spring, all the sugar that's stored in the roots of the tree start to run back up, and the sap starts to run. So in birch trees and apple trees and fruit trees and maple trees, the woodpeckers are able to drill holes into that inner bark called the phloem, where the sugary sap is. So they're not hurting the tree, because eventually the phloem will close up and new wood will, new bark will form. And so that's why these sapsuckers are considered keystone species, because so many other animals depend on them for a source of food in the late winter and early spring. Let's look a little bit at bird anatomy, because when you start to watch birds and you look them up and get information, there'll be terminology used to let you know what kind of species, to help you identify the bird. So they refer to the top of the head as the crown, of course, the beak or the bill, the throat. The top is called the breast and the bottom is called the belly. These are undertail coverts, of course, the tail. In the back here is a gland, an oil gland, called the preen gland or the uropygial gland. And birds will use that to cover their feathers in oil. And you see birds preening, no, not yet. You see birds preening all day long when they're not eating or flying or sleeping. They're cleaning their feathers and waterproofing their feathers. So here's a duck, and it's going into that preen gland, and then it's covering all of its feathers with oil. And you see all birds doing this. These are some other markings that you're going to be reading about when you're identifying a bird. There can be a ring around the eye. It can be partial, like on this kinglet. It doesn't go all the way around, but it's called an eye ring. Many birds have wing bars. that help you identify them. Like when mockingbirds fly, they have very large white wing bars. Up here, there might be a line above the eye called the eyebrow, and there might be dark lines across the cheek called the malar stripe, like on this peregrine falcon. You can see the malar stripe. And what it does is it deflects sunlight and reduces glare. So when the birds are, and these birds fly really fast when they're hunting, and it reduces glare so that they can catch whatever prey they're getting. Our athletes have learned to use these malar stripes on their cheeks so they can see the ball, so they're not blinded by the light. Okay, so that's migrating birds. Now let's look at our year-round birds that can stay here even in the coldest month, even when our environment looks like this. And this, I took that photo in the Heather Garden in Fort Tryon Park in northern Manhattan. So here are some of our year-round birds: blue jays, cardinals, goldfinches, mourning doves, mockingbirds, robins, and house finches, just to name a few. And these birds stay here because they can find food. Now, I want to talk about this, and I don't want to jump around. Acorns are the main food for the jays of the world. And blue jays are the most important oak tree forest regenerators. With jays, we have oaks. Without jays, we do not have oak trees. This is a map. The green shows the range of oak trees across the world. The blue and white wavy lines show where jays live. And where they intersect, that is where jays plant acorns. They can carry up to 6 acorns, 3 in their beak and 3 in their crop. So in one season, they can carry 3,000 to 5,000 acorns, which they bury under leaf litter. And many of them they don't find. And so new oak trees grow. Oak trees are the most important tree for wildlife. They are the host plant for between 500 and 600 species of butterflies and moths. And by host plant, I mean the female butterfly or moth will only lay her eggs on those leaves. So think about all the photos we saw of the migrating birds and all the caterpillars that they eat. Well, the caterpillars are the babies of moths and butterflies, right? So when you have oaks, you have caterpillars. When you have caterpillars, you have all these migrating birds and all these birds that feed insects to their young that live here year-round. Oak trees also provide habitat and food for hundreds of species of mammals. Even reptiles and amphibians rely on oak trees. So the blue jay and all the jays of the world and the oak tree go hand in hand. They need each other. And I know blue jays get a bad rap, but they are wonderful birds. When they're trying to scare someone away, they raise their crest. They're very good at chasing away the serial killers in the neighborhood, like this red-tailed hawk. They'll scream, Jay, Jay. Whenever you hear a blue jay screaming, Jay, 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 look up because there's probably a hawk nearby. Blue jays are fearless. If they can't get to their acorns or other food, you know, in the winter when there's a lot of snow, which we haven't had much recently, it's good to throw seed out for birds. They are devoted mates. They stay together for life. And you see here, their crests are not raised because when they're with their mates or their babies or their family unit, their crest is lowered. So when they have a nest full of babies, the babies stick around for the first year. And when they nest again, those babies, which are now yearlings, help the parents raise the new babies. So we have blue jays here, but across the world are different jays that are equally important to oak trees. So you have the scrub jay in California, the Steller's jay in the Rocky Mountains, the pinyon jay in the woodlands of the western United States. Okay, let's move on to cardinals, my muse. It's easy to tell them apart, right? They are also devoted to each other. They mate for life. Wherever you see a male, you'll see a female. Wherever you see a female, you'll see a male. She is very well camouflaged on her nest, and they make their nests in shrubs, in low bushes, and their nests are kind of flimsy. They're easy to see. If you see them going in and out of a shrub, you know there's a nest in there. Look how beautiful she is, how camouflaged she is. So they eat seeds. They have conical beaks for breaking up seeds, but they also feed on insects. They feed on, these are poison ivy berries in the autumn, which are, poison ivy is not good for us, but the berries are rich in protein and nutrients for birds. And in the winter, they have crab apples and hawthorn berries, all kinds of berries to feed on. So they're able to stay here year round. This wasn't always so. When I was a child, we didn't have cardinals up here. Now they're everywhere, thank goodness. Okay, let's move on to the goldfinch. Here we have American goldfinches. In the West, you have the lesser goldfinches. They're very similar. At this time of year, the male grows bright yellow feathers. And the female, look at her on the nest, you can hardly see her. She's much duller. In autumn, the males molt. They lose those bright golden feathers and they look like females. They turn brown for camouflage. And then this time of year, they grow their new golden feathers. By June, this is what they look like. They're tiny, acrobatic birds. They fly like this, and with each dip, they call out. They love seeds, some tiny seeds of echinacea. They have very strong and agile legs and feet, and tiny beaks so they can get seeds out of the sweet gum seed pods. They can hang upside down to get seeds. And again, in the winter, it's great to feed birds. Okay, let's go back to the robin. American robins. When I was a child, they migrated up here. Not anymore. Now they are able to find food year round, so they can stay here year round. There are some that migrate, but there are a lot that stay here. They mate and find a new mate every season to stay together and raise their young, and then they separate. That same pair may come back together in the following spring, but often they find a new mate. You see them running along lawns, in the park, on the street, and they have their head cocked down. They're listening for the movement of worms, and they're looking for the movement of grass as the worm moves under the dirt. And then they feed their young. And now, if you look at the baby beak, this is called a gape. And all baby birds have that. And it's easy for the parents to see when they're bending over them. And then many young birds are still fed for their parents, even by their parents, even when they fledge. And the babies will run after them, begging for food. So they stay here in the winter because they can find berries to eat. We also have year-round woodpeckers. We have several species. The smallest is the downy. It's a tiny little black and white woodpecker. The male has a red cap, the female doesn't. This is a hairy woodpecker, which is bigger than the downy and has a much longer bill. It's as long as its head. That's how you can tell the difference. And here's a female hairy compared to the red-bellied woodpecker, which is one of our largest. There's also a pileated, which is an enormous woodpecker. And it lives here year round. So woodpeckers feed on every type of insects, even termites. And these are termites hatching out. That's a male downy. But the year-round woodpeckers feed on berries, they feed on seeds, and they feed on suet. We also have raptors here. We have, I think in New York City alone, we have over 40 red-tailed hawk nests. There certainly are nesting in Riverdale. Wherever you see them, it causes a sense of wonder and astonishment. They are huge and beautiful. So this was on my terrace at the Whitehall. This is a juvenile red-tailed hawk. Palisades now are all green, of course. And this, I don't know if it was this individual, but a few nights ago, one showed up again. What a thrill. Get out of this. Okay. Okay, peregrine falcons. All of these raptors were almost completely exterminated in the 1950s and 60s because of the use of DDT to wipe out mosquitoes and malaria. And the DDT would wash into the waterways and wash onto the land and go into the tissues of insects and fish and anything that these raptors ate. And that would thin their eggshells. So when the mother bird sat on the eggs would break. And we were down to very few peregrine falcons when Rachel Carson wrote her book, The Silent Spring. And Congress finally created legislation that made it illegal to produce and sell DDT. And these birds have made an incredible rebound. So now in New York City, we have more peregrine falcons nesting and living than in any other urban area in the world. This is one of my favorite dioramas at the Museum of Natural History, where the falcon is carrying a pigeon. So here's the Hudson, here's New Jersey, the Palisades, carrying a pigeon to the nest. And they nest right on the rocks. It's called a scrape, that type of nest. They just put a few little things down there so the eggs don't roll off. But that's one reason why these birds have done so well in New York City, because they can make a nest on almost every building, every bridge. This is the Marine Park Bridge out in Jamaica Bay. This is a baby peregrine falcon. Look at those feet. And this is a peregrine bringing food in to her young on a building downtown. Our smallest falcon is the American kestrel. And this one had carried a little bird and was eating it on the ledge of my friend's apartment in Washington Heights. And that's her cat, Mr. Darcy, looking out the closed window. We have Cooper's hawks. We have many species of owls that live here year round, especially if you live at all near a park, you can hear them at night. This is a great horned owl, our largest native owl. Our smallest is the saw-whet. And I found saw-whets living in Pelham Bay Park by Orchard Beach in a group of pine trees. This is the screech owl and the barred owl. So let's look at the body of a raptor. It's very different from, say, their beak is very different from, say, the beak of a cardinal. Beak of a cardinal has evolved to be able to break seeds. The beak of a raptor has evolved to grab food and tear it apart. Bald eagle, red-tailed hawk, they all had this hooked beak. And then they had these enormous talons for grabbing. So let somebody in. For grabbing and carrying their food and killing their food. I want to now talk about, and I hope you're thinking of questions, and at the end, I'll, be happy to talk to you about anything. I want to talk about the non-native birds that have become naturalized over the hundreds of years since we immigrants came to North America, right? So in the early 1600s, people brought pigeons over because they had been pigeons had been domesticated for 5,000 to 10,000 years. And so when the colonists came over, the early settlers, they brought all kinds of things with them that they didn't know what they would find, including pigeons. I want to go back up. Okay. European starlings were introduced in 1890 when this guy from Brooklyn had the brilliant idea to release every species of bird mentioned in Shakespeare's writings. And there's one mention of the starling, and I can't remember if it's Henry VIII. This man released, I don't know, 40 starlings. There are now billions and billions of starlings across North America. The house sparrows were introduced in 1851. It's the male and the female. So pigeons get a bad rap, just like blue jays. And they are really tremendously intelligent, very loving. They mate for life. Driving me crazy. They have incredible homing ability and have been used during wars to send messages where nobody could get through. The pigeons could get through. And even if they were shot, they'd keep going. After World War II, England gave something like 47 medals to pigeons that had carried messages. They have been trained now to fly over sunken vessels and to spot the red and orange life vests of sailors and pilots lost at sea. They're beautiful. And they are a source of great love for many people. Sometimes they're the only wild thing you will see in New York City, in certain areas that don't have trees and don't have other birds. So I'm going to play a little video about pigeons.
Hello and welcome back to A Shot of Wildlife. In this video, I'm going to tell you almost everything you need to know about the feral pigeon. When it comes to wildlife, feral pigeons sit in a bit of a grey area. They are descended from a wild species, the rock dove, but almost all of them that are living in the wild today have domestic ancestors that escaped or got lost and set up a new life in the wild. Rock doves were domesticated between 5,000 and 10,000 years ago and have been selectively bred for meat, for fancy colours, patterns and shapes, and for their unique homing ability. These birds have an inbuilt understanding of their location in the world and can return to their home from hundreds, sometimes even thousands of miles away without ever seeing the route before. This has led to them being kept by pigeon racers who challenge one another to see if their pigeons can get home faster than their opponents. But it has also led to a much more valuable use, to save lives and to send messages during times of war. In fact, during the Second World War, 54 Dickens medals were awarded by the UK for the service of animals. Of these, 32 were given to pigeons. Because of their varied past, feral pigeons come in a wide range of colours and sizes, from completely black, red, blue, grey, completely white, and sometimes a mix of all of the above. They have a wingspan of 63 to 70 centimetres and weigh from 230 to 370 grams. Males are usually slightly larger than females, but as their size is so varied, from appearance alone, it's almost impossible to sex a pigeon. Historically, Rock doves would have eaten seeds, grains, berries, and fruits. But as feral pigeons live almost entirely around human settlements, their diet is far more varied and features a lot of scraps, some that are fed to them, and some which they get themselves from among rubbish. You may have noticed that some pigeons are missing toes or sometimes even their entire feet, and this is a direct result of them getting their food from in bins and among rubbish. Whilst doing so, they can become tangled in wire, string, or hair, and eventually cut off the circulation to their digits. Feral pigeons can breed from 6 months of age, when males will begin courting females. To do this, they puff their chest feathers and perform a dance, sometimes spinning, hopping, fanning their tails, and making the well-known bubbling pigeon call. Once a pair is formed, they will often remain together until one of them dies. After pairing, the birds create a flimsy platform nest of twigs and other small objects. Naturally, this would have been on a cliff edge or in a cave, but in cities they prefer to use man-made ledges, and almost ironically, they seem to be pretty good at making their nests on top of anti-bird spikes or among anti-bird netting. Each pair lays 2 eggs at a time. These are white, measure about 4 centimeters long, and take 18 to 19 days to hatch. When the chicks, which are known as squabs, first emerge, they are covered in a layer of yellow down. Both of their parents feed them in a nest with a cream-like substance, which is known as crop milk, which they produce in their crops, which is a pouch-like area in their throats. The squabs stay in the nest for between 24 and 30 days when they leave, fully feathered and about the same size as their parents. This is why you might think you've never seen a baby pigeon, because by the time they leave the nest, they're almost indistinguishable from adults. Young birds are fed by their parents for a further 2 weeks after leaving the nest, by which time the next clutch of eggs may have already been laid. Unlike most birds, feral pigeons can nest throughout the colder months, as long as there is enough food available, meaning in towns and cities they often do so and can rear up to 6 clutches within a year. I don't know how well it's coming across in this narration, but I really like feral pigeons, and I couldn't make a fact file about them without stating just how intelligent they are. They're one of the only birds that can recognise themselves in a mirror. They can identify every letter of the alphabet, they can count at least up to 9, and they've even been taught how to play ping pong. In the wild, feral pigeons have an average lifespan of 3 to 5 years, but their captive counterparts can live a lot longer, with the oldest pigeon on record making it to 24.5 years of age. And that's all for now. If you enjoyed this video, then you'll probably also like... Hello.
This is a baby pigeon. This is a volunteer at the Wild Bird Fund on West 87th and Columbus. And I have a little video about that too. So let's look at the house sparrow, female and the male. They will nest in any cavity they can find. And as you walk along any street or avenue and you look up at the traffic light poles and you look in the opening, you will see them going in and out. One year I was meeting a group of students to go into Central Park, and I was sitting on the steps when they still had this equestrian statue of Teddy Roosevelt. It's now since been moved, but a movement caught my eye, and I look up, and flying in and out of the nostrils of the horse were these house sparrows. Lastly, the European starling, a very brilliant bird, can mimic the human voice, can mimic musical instruments, 50 other bird songs. They can solve problems and are lifelong learners, and they're beautiful. Mozart had a pet starling, and which he bought after hearing, and he's walking down the street. The story goes, he was walking down the street, and he hears somebody whistling one of his compositions, that he hadn't published yet and hadn't played anywhere yet. And I think this pet store was near his home. So they must have heard him playing the piano and heard all the notes. So Mozart went into the store. It was a bird shop, and he bought the starling. And the starling lived with him for 3 years. And Mozart was devoted to this starling. Now, this woman named Leandra Haupt has written a book called Mozart's Starling, which I just finished this week. And it is fantastic because it's not only about starlings, but it's about the life of Mozart. But I just thought I would play this couple of minutes.
The idea for this book was really sudden, actually. I had heard about the story of Mozart's starling for years, probably even decades. But one day I was looking out the window of this study and a flock of starlings appeared on the grass. And I just became obsessed with the notion that this brilliant composer had as a companion this very common and what is in our country a reviled bird. Here they're a non-native invasive species. Conservationists like me, nature writers like me are supposed to hate starlings. So that sort of dissonance was very interesting to me. So I flew to Salzburg. I flew to Vienna. I read all of his biographies and his letters. And then perhaps the craziest thing I did was rescue a 5-day-old starling chick and raise her in our household.
Okay. I think it's pretty much over, but she named the bird Carmen, which means song, and wrote this wonderful book, which I highly recommend. But looking at that movie of her with the bird on her shoulder, I've had pet birds for many years. I don't have one now. And that feeling, the light little feet on your shoulder and the warmth of their body, and they're giving you kisses. Birds are so affectionate, and they're so much like us. They take care of their young, they take care of each other, they sing, they express joy. Anyway, protecting birds across all 50 states, working hard to create legislation to stop the killing of migrating birds, to stop the killing of birds for their plumes, where birds were almost wiped out because of the fashion of women's hats with these gigantic plumes, even dead birds sitting on their hats. That's all because of the Audubon Society. Now, I'm getting toward the end, but I had to mention that living in the Bronx now, that in the 1920s, a group of 9 teenage boys formed the Bronx County Bird Club. And one day they were birding somewhere at one of the parks, and there they see this very tall, thin young man sitting under a tree and drawing. And it was Roger Tory Peterson. He's the person that created all the Peterson Field Guides. He had come to New York to study art at the Art Students League, but he was passionate about birds. And so he'd go to all the different parks in New York to look at them. And they were so impressed with him and his art, they invited him to join the Bronx County Bird Club, which he did. So this is a picture of the 50th reunion of the ones that were left. And there he is in the back, Roger Tory Peterson. Boy. Okay. So if you're in Riverdale and you go down 235th Street and Riverdale Avenue, this is a brand new mural, which my neighbor Iris told me about. And this has all the migrating birds we've been looking at, and even an owl. And there's been this project, this Audubon project, where there have been murals created throughout Washington Heights in the Audubon section, the Audubon Park. Audubon lived in Washington Heights. He had an estate that he called Minnie's Land, which means little mother, with his wife and his sons, right on the Hudson. And so to honor him, they they brought in all these artists. So here's a painting of him up in here. And so if you walk down in the 150s on Broadway and the side streets, you'll see all these great murals. Wait a minute, no, there's that other. Oh, I know what this is. Let me see if I can do it from here. Yes. So this is the Wild Bird Club I was telling you about. There was that photo of that young woman with all the different color nail polish holding a baby pigeon.
A bird in New York City doesn't have it easy. Whether it's flying into a building, a car, bicycle, dogs, pollution, lead poisoning. This is not nature's natural course. We have interfered with it. My name is Rita McMahon, and I'm the co-founder and director of the Wild Bird Fund, New York City's one and only wildlife rehabilitation center. We take in birds that anyone has found, and we do our best to make it whole so that it can go back to the wild. The atmosphere at the Wild Bird Fund is something of a three-ring circus. There's the ISO room, the waterfowl room, reception area, and downstairs is a whole nother thing. There are a couple of hundred birds down there. They may be flying around in the air as people are scurrying around, cleaning the cages, giving them meds, and feeding them. We deal with 135 different species. This past week, we had a Canada goose, 7 kestrels, a rowdy bunch of juvenile herring gulls. This year, 2016, we will treat well over 4,000 birds. By being in New York City, where the animal is found, we are able to save many more animals. They would die before they could get help in another state or another county. People can come to you via subway or bus, and they can get the animal to you faster. It's exciting. You never really know who's going to walk through that door or what they're holding in that box.
I was at my store and I saw the pigeon. I saw that he was like bleeding on the floor, like pretty bad. I didn't even know that they took in pigeons. Okay.
Any animal that is picked up is in really bad shape. 50% will die or are euthanized. If we can reduce the suffering, that's a good thing too. But 50% go free. When the bird's better, you try to return it to where it came. If it's an adult bird, it might have family, friends, it knows where to live. The migratory birds, they're just passing through. You're really just trying to put them in a safe place so that they can continue their journey.
Oh God, it's such a wonderful place. There was an article in the New York Times about this woman who found a hurt swan. I don't know if it was out in Brooklyn, and she took the A train, and brought the swan to them. It's just a wonderful, wonderful organization. Come on, come on. All right. All right. The last thing I want to show you is a video made during COVID about the joys of birding and birding with a group or by yourself. Nope.
You can bird watch anywhere. It's
Just leave it
going out
here.
and listening and observing and watching the behavior of birds, simply. And you can do it anywhere. You can do it. I do it right from my window here. You can go into the woods to do it, or you can travel and do it. Birds are everywhere. Bird watching implies that you're using your eyes. Birding implies that you're using both your ears and your eyes. On a checklist, you can say, I checked that bird off because you heard it and you know it's called without ever seeing it. They're here in the middle of the city and they're surviving. Normally there's walks, Linnaean Society, New York City Audubon, Museum of Natural History, all kinds of clubs giving walks all the time. And you really see a lot more birds that way. And you meet a lot of nice people. So I started this birding club in, it was 2007. I started this because I was walking through the park here where we go birding. There was nobody there. Nobody was birding. Maybe one person, two people. And I said, wow, people have to know about this because Central Park was packed with birds. So I started a website called City Island Birds, and I offer free bird walks. And now we have about 300 people on the list. And hundreds of people have gone on the walks. And it's great to see them in the city. I mean, just, you know, otherwise we look out and all you see is concrete and buildings, and you see a bird and it kind of gives you hope. It was this industrialized place. It's part of nature. It's great to see nature. And I think we all need it. I think people realize it more and more during COVID, where a lot of people became birders when they went for walks in Central Park and saw birds. And they never really looked before because they were too busy with other aspects of their life. My friend and I said, well, we're not doing any more walks. It's too dangerous. We realized it because we realized when you see a bird and you're looking up at the tree and you're looking at the bird and you have the angle, everybody rushes over, you know, and everybody bunches up in one spot to get that angle on the bird. Not good. Also, we were sharing scopes, you know, shit. People would say, hey, try my binoculars, you know, not a good idea. So now we're just more, everybody wears masks, everybody is spread apart. The limit is 10 on the New York City Audubon walk. So there's one on Van Cortlandt Park on Saturday. I said I would do one a month. And also limit exposure. If I get COVID, I'm in trouble. I mean, birds are, they're really interesting creatures.
What can you find outside? Now I'm going to stop. Here I am. You still there?
The most wonderful program that I could have imagined. I wish everything was a little bit slower, but then you covered everything.
So sorry.
So that's
I
fine.
do too. I'm
I
like
tried to
sweating.
take quick. I tried to take quick notes, but that's all right. Maybe you can come again and a little slower. But whatever it was gorgeous, beautiful. Thank you.
And her books are available also on through Kindle. You can get Kindle versions for like about $3.
Sometimes they're on sale. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Leslie, I will also mention to you the next time you're going to do a slideshow, you might want to check the transitions menu. I think there's something in there about
Yeah,
timing.
you know, I teach on Zoom.
Yeah, but I
Um,
think that's where it is. It's probably just not set up correctly. It's
I mean,
it's
I
advancing
I
automatically rather than by the mouse click.
I I taught yesterday and did a slideshow and this didn't happen. So, but that's where I have to go. You're right.
Yeah, that's where it is. But this was absolutely delightful. I'm in the Boston area. I live right next door to a small cemetery, and I get so much fun out of watching the robins and blue jays and cardinals. We've got flickers there. The little downy-headed woodpeckers are there. So thank you for helping me identify them and enjoy them even more.
You're welcome.
So,
Okay, after you, we have a question here, so go
Okay.
ahead.
Yes, this was great also. My father lives in the Bronx. I grew up in the Bronx. I live in Maryland. And what other programs are you going to be doing and how do we find out about them?
You. Well, I'm leading a walk in Wave Hill, a bird walk on May 14th, but that's really limited. I guess just check my website. I think once my book on the Hudson comes out, I'll become much more busy than I am now. Right now, I'm just teaching class at the New York Botanical Garden.
And what is your website?
Leslie Day NYC.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Are there any programs on, I am at home all the time, so are there any virtual webinars from any organization that I can write myself down the name of the organization to contact them?
There's so
Webinars.
many. There's so many. If you go look up American Museum of Natural History, if you look up the Audubon Society, if you look up, and now it's called the New York City Bird Alliance.
Audubon Society.
Yes, and
then New York City Bird Alliance. Okay, got that.
Yeah, they all give free talks, podcasts, walk.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Put it down.
Okay, we have a question here. I'll repeat it if you can't hear it.
Okay. When I first came to the city years and years ago, there were tons of pigeons. Now, to my mind, pigeons are almost an endangered species.
Oh, no. Many pigeons.
Yeah. But in my neighborhood, I don't see pigeons. But what eats pigeons? What hunts pigeons? Do you know?
Could you hear the question?
I didn't hear the very last part.
Yeah,
What?
she was wondering, it seems like there are fewer pigeons.
Right.
They're like an endangered species. And
what harms
what
them?
hunts pigeons?
Red-tailed hawks, peregrine falcons, Cooper hawks, owls, not so much. The raptors, but also they're poisoned. People put out poison. I don't know. Where do you live that you see fewer pigeons?
I live by Woodlawn Cemetery.
So she lives near Woodlawn Cemetery.
Yeah, I heard that. So in the cemetery, that's not where you would find pigeons because they like to live where people who are alive are living, right? Not the dead. Because they eat our garbage, right? That's their source of food. Unless you're a pigeon feeder, people, then they recognize their feeders. But because you live near essentially a beautiful park, so you won't see many pigeons around there, but they're also hunted by all the raptors that live in the city.
Does that mean raptors are gaining in size? I mean, how should I phrase this? We're getting more raptors and they're
Yes.
surviving in the city?
Definitely. When there was I think he passed away this year. Pale Male was a red-tailed hawk it was the first red-tailed hawk anywhere to build his nest on a human-made building. Normally they nest in trees. His building was a Fifth Avenue balcony between 74th and 75th Streets in the same building that Woody Allen lived in. And the building tried to get rid of the nest, but there was such an outpouring of anger and shock that they would try to harm this bird, that the building eventually relented and let the bird nest there. And he nested there for like 20 years. And many of his offspring build their nest on buildings. And we have red-tailed hawks here in Riverdale. I mean, I can't think of a neighborhood where there are not red-tailed hawks. They are everywhere and very successful. The same thing with peregrines, because they got rid of DDT, that insecticide. You have all these raptors now that are quite successful. We even have bald eagles in New York City now. I see bald eagles flying by the Hudson frequently. And I have friends who've seen them flying over Fort Tryon Park, Central Park. So there's this great resurgence of these birds of prey.
And I have a quickie. The pigeons, when they, let's say, have those 2 eggs, and then after a month, everything is over, then they start again mating and another 2 eggs, and it's continuum like that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's every month, but as long as they can find food and raise their young, they'll keep having babies. And the same thing with house sparrows. When I lived on a boat, I had a cat named Woody, who was a very he was a hunter who had a heart, and he would bring birds in his mouth without harming them. And
Wow.
I think they were gifts, but normally a cat will kill a bird, right? So Woody would come in and he had this funny sound because his mouth was closed and he was trying to get my attention. And I look, he has a baby house sparrow in his mouth. So I opened the jaws of death, right? And I have this little bird laying in my hand, and outside are the parents screaming their heads off. They're standing on a piling outside my boat, yelling and yelling. And I'm sure they're saying, "We told you to be careful of cats. Why weren't you careful? You got captured. So anyway, the bird eventually stood up and I opened the window and it flew off, and both parents accompanied it all the way back.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yes.
And
They-
also, talking about sparrow, the male is kind of the darker shade, and then the other one is like brownish more,
Very
the female. And the
Right.
other last question is about the what just meant the pigeons. Something about a milk product to kind of glue.
Yeah, so they
What
have
was
this
it?
very protein-rich liquid that they manufacture in their crop that we
Yeah.
call crop milk. Their babies cannot, and this is true of mourning doves too, their babies cannot digest seeds and they don't feed them insects. So for the first, I don't know how many days, all they get is this milk from
Oh,
both parents manufacture it. And you
wow.
can open their mouth and the babies put their beak in there and drink the crop milk.
That's amazing. Now, is this morning MORNING or
No,
is it MOUR, right?
yeah,
Yeah, I figured that much. Yeah.
yeah,
Thank you
because they
so
make a sound like they're grieving, like,
Good evening. Yeah. Sure. Thank you so much. Oh, it was so beautiful what
oh,
you
good.
presented. Oh,
Yay, thank you.
amazing. Thank you. Made me happy.
Good, that's what I want.
Helen, we have another question here, and I can repeat it.
Ewing Park, in the spring, there were robins galore. Now all the trees are down, and I always looked forward to the robins, and they're not nesting there any longer.
So is there a question?
Yeah, I'd like to know, at this point, is there anybody who is looking into that? Why,
Where were these trees taken down?
Ewing
Yes.
Park, you said?
in the park, yeah.
In which
What
park?
park?
Ewing Park.
Ewing Park.
Oh, Ewing Park. I wonder why they took the trees down.
Well, I think they were older trees and they were afraid of the wind blowing in different directions.
So they had to, yeah.
But that was the.
Well, the robins will find other trees to nest in. There's no I think there are more robins nesting than almost any native bird. So I think you have to, they probably needed to, are you saying there's no more trees at all in Ewing Park?
Very few, and I haven't seen the robins, and every spring they were there.
Yeah, give them time. Because right now I see robins running around the Seton Park lawn I haven't seen any robins nesting yet. So it could be it's a tad early.
Okay. Anybody else? No, we're good. All right. So
Okay, one last thing. Where do we look for robins' nests? Where do they nest? Down, up, in the tree? Because they are, I
They
like
ne-
them because they stay on the
Hel-
ground a lot. But
Yeah.
They nest in trees, not in shrubs. They also nest on fire escapes. My
Oh.
neighbor in Washington Heights called me to come over. And on the fire escape was the beautiful blue eggs. And then the babies hatch, and we could watch them being fed. But you have to look in trees. Just if you see a robin flying, any bird flying, you follow them with your eyes. And if they disappear into a tree or a shrub, then you know the nest is in there.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Leslie. This is wonderful. You know, we really appreciate it. I know we already have some people who have signed up for the walk.
But
And so we'll do our best. I don't think it'll take much to get the bus filled up.
yeah, I mean, and this is high migration time. So we're going to see a lot of really interesting birds.
Yes. So we definitely, and I believe I'll be joining you. So I look forward
Okay.
to it.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. Take care. All right,
Bye-bye.
bye-bye.